How you doing, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Coffee with Colin. My name is Colin Egglesfield, and it is Memorial Day. I just want to say thank you to all the service people out there who have dedicated and given their lives in service of supporting this amazing country and allowing us to enjoy the freedoms that we have in this country. That I think a lot of the times we tend to not remember, or it's not the forefront of our consciousness. And just want to say thank you from myself, from my family, to everyone out there who is continually just putting yourselves out there for the betterment of everyone else out here. It's one thing to say that you are proud to be American. It's another thing to actually do something about it. And as JFK said, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. And I think it's really important nowadays to really think about how we can be of service to other people. I think what really has been the game changer in my life has been my mind shift and my mindset shifting from one of the things that one of my acting teachers taught me, which was when you go into an audition. And most of the time, she said, most actors, when they go into an audition, it's all about the actor, and it's all about wanting to get the job, and it's all about me walking into that room, hoping that these producers and these directors will pick me for the job. And there's an energy that we walk into a room whenever we want something from someone else, and people can sense that. And when we walk into a room with the energy of service and offering something, it's a completely different game-changing energy. And when people sense that you don't need anything from them, you don't want anything from them, but you're there to genuinely serve with a pure and open heart, it definitely makes a difference in the way in which people relate to you and connect with you. And it really just starts to create some trust and some relationship grounding, so that you can start to build a relationship from that point. And I think it's just really important that we remember that for all the servicemen out there and women who are, dedicating and putting their lives on the line for all of us Americans. I really appreciate that, and just want to say thank you to all of you. That being said, I want to say thank you to all of our continued support, with everyone who shows up continually every Monday night to watch this show. I love doing the show because I love to have inspiring conversations with incredible people. I'm always learning something new. And I think in life, if you're not learning and you're not growing, then you're going the opposite way. And the opposite way, I think our soul can tell when we are not doing something to continually improve our lives. And my guest tonight is someone who has been dedicating his life to improving upon it after something that happened to him quite a few years ago. And I'm really interested and excited to have this conversation with him because, we talk about resiliency in my courses and in my coaching programs. And this man who I'm going to have on tonight, he's the definition of resiliency and overcoming things in his life that may not have necessarily turned out the way that he thought his life was going to turn out. But I think it's all about not what happens to us in our lives, but how we pick up the pieces and we move forward in life and try to make a difference in our lives from the experiences that we've had. We can't go back in the past and change what happened in the past, but what we can do is learn from the things that we've done in our lives, take responsibility for those things in our lives, and really examine what the meaning is that we are associating with that. Because a lot of the times when we are holding on to the things that happened in our past and not forgiving ourselves, not forgiving other people, it can keep us in a place of feeling stuck and in a place where it's hard for us to move forward. So tonight's guest, I'm excited to have this conversation because we're going to be talking all about this. And we're also going to be chatting about his coaching program that he has. I'm just going to read his bio here so we get a better idea of who my guest is. So his name is Jason Holland, and he was locked up. He was in prison for 28 years. And his basically what he's what he's here to talk about tonight is having served 28 years on what was originally a sentence of life without parole. While he was incarcerated, he developed a skill set and system for helping others break through their own barriers and achieve lasting results. Jason has transitioned from a place of hopelessness and loss to one filled with purpose and love, following a challenging journey, battling addiction and living a criminal life in his younger years. In his coaching, he delves into the complexities of leading a multidimensional life and explores the process of reconnecting with oneself, others, and the ongoing journey of personal renewal. His story serves as a beacon of inspiration for those seeking to navigate their own paths to recovery and self-discovery. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Mr. Jason Holland. How you doing, Jason?
I'm well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate your time and giving up your Memorial Day Monday to be here with us.
No, it's a pleasure.
Share some of your insight and wisdom about your experiences. And man, wow. Just hearing your brief story, I'm really interested in just delving into who you are, what your experience has been, and what you're doing now as a result of everything that happened. And this was 28 years ago?
Yes. In 1995 is when I committed the crime that sent me to prison with a life without sentence. I was 18 years old at the time. I reached my first real prison yard by the age of 20, going through the jail system and reception center. And then that started a whole process, and really what seems like another life at this point. But it was a 28-year journey to get to where I am now. And I was released 9 months ago.
Wow. Only 9 months ago. Okay.
Yeah.
And so this was up in just north of Los Angeles where you grew up, right?
Yes. In Agora Hills.
Okay. Yeah. And can you share with us a little bit about like the environment that you grew up in? Because I think sometimes without really knowing the context of where people come from, it's easy for us to quickly label people and place judgment on someone for, having gone to jail. And I myself, I've gone to jail twice for stupid, minor, little dumb ass things that I did when I was 18 years old, being caught with drinking beer underage, using someone else's ID to get into a bar. And then a few years ago, when someone stole my jacket at a bar and I got arrested for, what was it? I knocked over a metal stanchion at the bar walking out because I was, pissed off that someone stole my jacket. But what we're talking about here with you is just a completely different circumstances here. So if you could just share with us a little bit about your background and where the environment that you grew up in, maybe a little bit about your family life, so we can get an idea of who you are and what your background is.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to start, because the truth is that on the day that I committed the crime, the story had really started much before that. And so I grew up actually in New Orleans, Louisiana, and witnessed abuse in the home, divorce, substance abuse. And then my mother married my stepfather, and my stepfather, my brother, and I moved to California, to Agora Hills, for him to support him in his pursuit of his career. The home life was challenging, right? And difficult at times with the dynamics in the family. And I think what's important to remember is that growing up, my ability to process what was happening was stunted to the extent that I was telling myself a story that these things were happening to me. And that essentially I was a victim of these circumstances. And eventually I began to develop resentments around them. At 14, my mom separated from my stepfather and moved us to a new place. And I began hanging around with a new set of friends. And I started experimenting with drugs, uh, smoking, and truancy. And what happened was my mother, on the advice of a psychiatrist or psychologist, had my brother and I sent away. We got sent to a boarding school in Missouri for a year.
How old were
And when I
you?
came back, I was 15 at the time when I was sent away,
Yeah.
and when I was 16 when I came back. That experience was one of the key experiences in my life because what happened was, um, I held a real resentment against my mother at the time because
Mm.
I felt like she had betrayed us by sending us away. I see now that she was doing the best that she could and that it made sense to her. But at
Mhm.
the time, in the mind of a 16-year-old who was resentful and angry and defiant, I utilized that to become the excuse for me to just basically do what I wanted to do. Right.
Right.
So when I came back, at the age of 16, um, socially, I was struggling, and academically, I was struggling. And so what I started doing was I started gravitating towards smoking weed. And in
Mm.
order to stay high and numb, and at first I was telling myself that I was just having fun, but eventually I was escaping social pressures and academic pressures. Well, in order to do that, I had to go around the people that had weed. And so then I was going around people that were involved with crime. And in order to prove myself to them, I started committing crime and engaging in crime. And I became addicted to a criminal lifestyle and a lifestyle that involved chasing substances and substance abuse and the thrills that come along with that. And in that decision to pursue that, I gave up pursuing education, academics, and things that would be socially acceptable.
Mm.
And I was okay with doing that at the time because my mindset and my mentality was basically, I'm going to do what I want to do, and anyone that stands in my way is an enemy. And so basically, anyone that stood in my way, I would just put myself as opposed to them to give myself further permission to do whatever it is that I wanted to do.
Mm.
This behavior and mindset escalated and progressed, until eventually I took someone's life. Now, it's very harsh to say that, and it is a harsh actuality that happened. It's a harsh reality that happened with trauma to all sides for everyone that was involved. And when I think back to the young man that I was at the time, I was a person who was confused. I was a person who was really hurting. I was a person who didn't know how to ask for help because in my mind, I thought that a man didn't have to ask for help because I thought I should just know the answers. And I was ashamed that I needed to ask for help. And
Mm.
I was ashamed that I was afraid. And I was ashamed that I felt weak. And so, as a person that was confused and hurt, I brought about confusion and hurt in my life. And that's not a justification by any means. What it is it's me telling you that what was going on inside of me, I was bringing out in the world outside of me because I didn't know how to properly deal with what was occurring for me. And eventually, tragically, I took the life of another young man, seriously hurt another one, and myself and my co-defendants were sent away with life sentences. A life without parole sentence is essentially a death sentence. Um, I went to prison at a time in the 90s when it was a much different landscape than it is now, and a very hopeless landscape. And the narrative inside of prison was very much hopeless. And because I wasn't ready to deal with the full ramifications of my own responsibility in the way that my life had unfolded and the harm that I'd caused other people and the harm that I'd caused myself, I just stayed in denial. And I just stayed in denial by blaming society, by blaming people that I looked at as enemies or that I put myself opposed to.
Mm.
Um, and I stayed in the narrative, telling myself that everyone else was to blame but me and that I was right.
Mm.
And I did that to justify the fact that I didn't change my behavior when I went to prison. And what I did was I surrounded myself with people who told themselves the same victim story so that we could all just encourage each other to stay in that cycle. And the cycle of addiction can happen not just with substances. It can not just happen with emotions or other behaviors like overeating or gambling, but it also can happen in criminality and living a lifestyle that's designed around staying in an addictive cycle. And that's what I did for many years. And so in prison, I continued over, I'd say, the next 19 years, uh, struggling to find a way while not really understanding the full depth of what my responsibility was or how to take responsibility for my life. And I constantly looked to other people to validate me so that I could validate myself. And that was a recurring theme in my life. I reached a point eventually, after digging a hole so deep for myself, that I reached a breaking point where I came to a place where I knew that I no longer could avoid facing what was going on inside of me and avoid facing like what I had done. It had become apparent so much that there was no longer any denial. There was no longer any hiding from it. And I was in a very broken place, spiritually, emotionally, physically just exhausted.
What
And
really brought you to that place after, what was it? You said 18 years, 20 years?
19 years, it was around the 19-year mark, when I really hit myself in a place where I was like, I can't deny this anymore, because I had been living this sort of double lifestyle for quite some time. Um, I was involved with things in prison that, frankly, I shouldn't have been involved with. And I would give myself all the reasons to stay involved with those things.
Mhm.
And I was telling myself, well, I'm a good guy and I'm just here because of this thing that happened a long time ago, but that doesn't make me a bad person. But in order to survive in prison, in order to get along in prison, I need to be now involved with these other things rather than just completely having the courage to remove myself from all of it completely.
Mhm.
Right. And to really look at myself and say, hey, what's going on with you? Like, what's really going on with you that brought you to this place, rather than blaming the rest of the world around me. I didn't want to confront that inside of me yet. And so what happened was, uh, I had someone that was very close to me that was in a severe addiction. And I saw this individual, um, losing losing his touch with reality. And I saw brokenness and despair all around me, myself included. Like, I was completely hopeless at that point. I was still serving a life without sentence. My relationships were really somewhat superficial, and even the ones that were deep, even the ones that were loving, like the relationship with my mother and my sister,
Mhm.
um, uh, my fiance, all of that, they were deep, but they were also, I knew that I was lying to them. And so there was a part of me that was disconnected from everyone
Mhm.
and disconnected from my own humanity.
Mhm.
And I'd reached a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. Like, my life wasn't, there was no meaning to my life. And I looked around me and I said, if this is all there is, I can't do this. Something has to change. And watching the person that was struggling with addiction so heavily, mind you, I had addiction problems at the same time, but they showed up differently in my life. So I
Mhm.
was staying blind to them. But the situation with this one individual in particular, it was heartbreaking to me. Like, it really broke me down. And it really made me question my place in the world. And I happened to be taking a self-help course through the mail at the time. And the course had a section on scripting. And scripting is when you pick up beliefs, scripts about yourself and the world
Mhm.
as you go along in life. And the course was talking about how we pick up these beliefs, but it
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily mean that they're real.
Right.
And I thought about how much of my life and my mind at that time had been wrapped up in the prison world and
Mm-hmm.
narrowed to this scope of prison and what mattered, because I had adopted the mentality of being a convict and a prisoner and a criminal. And as I was thinking about it, I realized like how much of this stuff that I've adopted that I think is right and wrong about the world is real. How much of it is just a script?
Mm-hmm.
And that idea opened my mind to like, wait a second, hold on. These ideas that I've picked up as a criminal, because the idea like criminal morality is vastly different than the morality in of a person that lives outside in the
How
outside
so?
world.
What's the
So,
difference?
so okay, I'll give you an example. For a criminal, it's morally correct for for many criminals in prison, in California prison, it would be morally correct to assault another inmate for perceived disrespect,
Okay.
right? To dramatically and violently assault another human being because the other person said something that they didn't like. Whereas there's people out here in the outside world that would never dream of doing such a thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's one uh, example, and there are many. But I picked up all of these ideas and survival strategies, and I began to really question, like, hold up a second, like, how do I know any of this is like real, and is it real for me? Does it resonate with me? Because one of the big problems that I had at the time, one of the things that I could not reconcile for myself at the time was that even though I told myself I was a good guy and had to do these things and had to live this lifestyle to survive in prison, I had conflict inside of me. I had this sense, this abiding sense of internal conflict that was persistently there. And I didn't realize at the time that a big part of that was just because I was living a duplicitous lifestyle. I didn't have any real sense of like integrity happening.
Mm-hmm.
I had compartmentalized like my face and my persona that I was showing to other people. And I lived in what's called impression management. I lived constantly trying to manage other people's impressions. And if I could convince them that I was this guy, then I could believe it in myself. But something wasn't right with that. Something didn't feel right. And at this point in time, the time when I hit my real rock bottom, my breaking point, is when all of it, the whole house came crashing down. And in that moment, Colin, all my smarts, all my wits, my perceived power, my strength, whatever I thought, my network, whatever I thought I had, whatever I built myself up to be, it was nothing. It was empty. And I was broken open. And it was a hard time, a very, very difficult time for me. Um, but it was probably one of the best things that ever happened for me. And because I had the courage to begin taking the actions to remove myself from all of the negative things that I had been involved with. Um, and mind you, that part of this was having the willingness to walk away from someone that I cared so much about, but who had been accomplice to me and enabled me in my addiction,
Mm-hmm.
right? But having the willingness to walk away and say, hey, I can't do this with you anymore. I need to go for me. And having that willingness and the courage to do that, even though it was tearing me apart, but I needed that. And I walked away, and there's a whole story with that.
Mm-hmm.
But
How did
having the
how
courage
did
to do
he take
that,
that?
go ahead. Yeah.
How did he take that?
Well, he decided to come with me rather than stay in
Uh,
Holland. He decided, look, if you're going to change your life, I'm going to go with you, right? And that began a whole journey of um, he and I walking together through recovery, and
mm-hmm.
how both of us struggled with our own journey through that. And it's a whole story. What I think is important though was while my story played out the way that it did, having the willingness and the courage to acknowledge the fact that I needed to take these steps for me at a time when it was incredibly difficult and frightening, but I was able to do so, I think was crucial to who I am today and where I am today. From there, I about a few months later, I was in this state of where I didn't really know who I was anymore because now my identity was fractured. And what I mean by that was I had created this persona of who I was in there,
Mhm.
and I was so wrapped up around that persona that I really had never considered who am I without keeping up this impression, right? And so by me walking away from all of that and beginning to change my life, I'm now going through a process of beginning to unravel, well, who am I really?
Mhm.
And if I'm not this guy, if I'm not this persona, well, who am I? Who was I meant to be? And I read this book by Anthony Robbins called Unlimited Power.
Mhm.
And this book, it rocked me, man. Like I read this book and I had never imagined that I could take control of some of these things, right? Like I had been plagued with um, a sort of depression. I had been plagued with this narrative that had been going on in my mind. And I didn't realize that that's all it was. It was just a story. It was just a narrative. I thought that the way I viewed the world was real, and that if I was subject to moods and depression and like spells, I used to call them like it's the spell, it's back, right? That was something that I just needed to deal with. When I read that book by Anthony Robbins, it completely altered the way that I viewed um, my experience. And I took a lot of notes from that book. And then I began reading other self help books. And then I began applying it. Now, I didn't know what I was doing, right? I had no, like, all I had was faith that, like, all I had was a willingness to move forward and faith that if I applied some of these things, something would work somewhere. And so what happened was, I'm studying all these books. I really don't know what I'm doing, and I'm taking notes. But some of the stuff makes sense. Like if you want to do something in life, find someone who's doing it and just role model, like model them,
Yep.
figure out, and then be willing to go ask them how they did it, right?
Yep.
Little things like that. Well, at this point in my life, I'm now changing my entire like design on life. I'm thinking, okay, what is my real potential here? Because that book, it woke up the idea to me, like, what is my potential?
Mhm.
And I always felt that I had potential, but I'd always like quit on myself. And at this point in my life, now I'm at this place where I'm broken open and I'm searching for a new identity. And I'm like, well, you know what? I've never really tried. I've given up on everything. I gave up on my youth and I turned to drugs and crime. I gave up in here and just stayed in it. Like, what is my real potential? And I thought, okay, if I'm going to spend the rest of my life like doing something, why not chase this? Why not find out like how good can you really be?
Mhm.
And so, but the only thing I really had to do was turn to the books because those were my guides. So
Mhm.
Stephen Covey, Anthony Robbins, Napoleon Hill, these were the first guys that I started with, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like reading their stuff over and over and over, trying to figure it out, trying to figure out the code. And so at this time, now when I first came into prison, recovery and rehabilitation weren't a thing. When I first came into the prison, like I remember distinctly hitting a level 4 yard, which is like the highest level security in 1995, 96. And some guys sat me down at the table and they said, what are you going to do with your life? And I said, I don't know. And they said, well, you got life without. So you might as well make a name for yourself because you're never going home.
These
And
were other prisoners in the
yeah,
prison.
these were other prisoners,
Yeah.
right? And that was the narrative when I first went in there. Like, no one's going home. They're not paroling anyone.
Yeah.
The only thing to do is to be involved with politics in prison, smuggling drugs, and building a name for yourself, right? Now, I had other opportunities, but I chose to go that way, right?
Sure.
Because when I was younger, I had allowed myself to become bullied in my teenage years, and I was deeply ashamed of that. And when I first went into prison and with a life without sentence, I was
Mhm.
afraid of being bullied. Like the one thing I was afraid of was like, I'm not going to be trapped in here with a life without sentence and get bullied the whole time.
Mhm.
So I knew how to be a criminal. I knew how to like be violent. And so what these guys were telling me was like, okay, you can do this and you can remain safe, so to speak. There wasn't a good choice. There was another choice. I could have had courage at the time. I could have started recovery much sooner. I just didn't have it. I didn't pull it up. I wasn't willing to step into it. But now, many years later, I'm in this place now where I'm willing to find the courage in myself, right? I'm willing to walk towards that. Um, and now what's happening in prison, in the landscape of prison, is they're starting to infuse recovery groups into prison because they're starting to give people a way home now, right? And I happen to land on a yard, a new yard, where there's a crew of guys that are doing these really innovative things in the prison, involved with groups. They've created a newsletter. They're doing these special events, like nothing that I had ever seen before.
Mm.
Imagine like this bleak landscape where what you know is violence, drug use, and disconnect. And
Mhm.
now going to a place where it's embracing education, embracing vulnerability, and real fraternity, real brotherhood and community,
Mhm.
right? Like that was one of like the buzzwords around the yard, community. Like guys would be like jokingly, but there was something to that. Like they wanted to, like, what is community, right?
Yeah. Do you mind
And
if I
so
just interrupt you for a
please,
second, just
please.
to get a little further context about before we move on to that part? Um,
Mm,
so from when you were in that phase of your life where you were doing criminal activity, uh,
mhm.
this was up near Agora Hills area of California?
You mean when I was free?
Yeah, when you were like
Yeah.
17, 16, 17, 18, when you started getting involved in criminal activity.
Yeah, I was committing crimes all through Agora Hills and neighboring towns, and also deep into the valley
Okay.
in LA area. Yeah.
If you were to go if let's say you were able to go back to as you now to go back to
Mm.
speak to that young man at 16, 17 years old before what happened, what would you say your younger self would have needed and wanted to hear from someone who
Mm.
could have guided him?
Um, Ultimately, I think that what I really needed to hear was that what I was going through was okay. Like the confusion that I felt was normal,
Okay.
right? The fear that I felt was normal. Like I attributed fear to being a coward,
Hmm.
and like, you know what? That's okay too. Like let's talk about that. But because I was so bottled up
Hmm.
and I was just afraid to talk to anyone about anything, I thought I had to have the answers. And I'm looking to my peers for the answers, but they were like, no bad on them, but they were just a bunch of mixed up kids too.
Sure. Yeah.
And the
What
way that we're dealing with it is we're encouraging each other just to get more high, get more drunk, and do more crazy things.
Where
So
was your
yeah,
mom in all of this?
my mom was working and she was trying to connect with me. She was trying to connect with my younger brother, and I wasn't having it because I was viewing her as someone who was against what I was doing.
Mm.
And so I was blocking her off, and I was using any any reason, any petty reason I could to basically not listen to her and give myself permission to do whatever I wanted, right?
Mhm.
And it's the same with any other, like I had other adults who came and spoke to me, and they were like my friends' parents that I grew up living at their houses, basically, like spending weekends at their houses. And they tried to come speak to me and I wouldn't hear them because at that time I was deep into uh being influenced by my friends.
Mhm.
And again, there's no bad on anyone else. This is where I was at the time, and I wanted my friends' approval, and that's what had the value for me.
Mhm.
So the adults were just people, basically, even if they were coming and trying to essentially like save me or show me the way, I viewed all of that as a threat.
Mhm.
For whatever reason at the time, because of who I was at the time and the way that I was viewing myself, other people in the world, I selected the option that I thought was best.
Mhm.
and I discounted other options. Yeah.
And do you feel like a big part of that was just not having a male influence in your life to help guide you and help you transition from boyhood to manhood? Did that play a role in it?
I think it played a role. Not necessarily that I didn't have a male influence, is that I didn't trust the male influences. Because
your father was gone?
Right. Well, my stepfather and I, we at that point had really had some contentious relationships, and there was some physical violence between us, and just distrust had built, and betrayal had built, and then my narrative that he was against me had built, and I lived into that story, right? And then the only other adults that I wanted to look to, or the only other males that I wanted to look to, were my peers, and I wanted to be like them because they had something that I wanted. And what I thought they had was, I thought that they had power, right?
Yeah.
Like it wasn't necessarily, it was later, much later down the line, what I realized is what I wanted was power. And it's because I felt weak. And so I turned to all these other things in a false sense of empowerment, a misguided sense of empowerment, rather than a healthy one. Yeah.
I was rehabbing houses in the south side of Chicago, and I met, just there's a lot of violence and crime that goes on down there in the south side. And just from meeting some of the guys that I was working with, some of them formerly incarcerated. And as I got to know them, a lot of them just told me that it was either you joined the gangs and you joined that life, or you essentially were on your own, and it was more dangerous not to be a part of that than
scary
be a part of it. And a lot of these guys told me that, they didn't have fathers growing up or male influences, and that the only way in which they did feel that sense of belonging and that sense of respect and connection was by being a part of the gang community. I guess my question is, and we've got, a couple of questions here from the viewers here, and anyone who has a question, feel free to type into the chat. Elizabeth, thank you for your question. Chrissy and Elizabeth seem to have a similar question in terms of, you've already mentioned what your younger self needed to hear or wanted to hear, that could have made a difference for maybe some parents out there who have kids who are maybe in the same situation as you were back then. Just realistically, is there something that can be done when, a young man finds himself in a situation like this, where really, like you said, you craved power, you craved that connection, and it was just that, I guess, looking up to the role model that you had. What can be done for maybe someone whose kids are involved in similar situations? Because you said you had some of your friends' parents try to talk to you, your mom was trying to talk to you. What can possibly be the thing that breaks that cycle so that this just doesn't happen to other kids, do you think?
That's a really good question. And it's probably a question that many parents have asked themselves that have ended up with like children in my situation. And I think that ultimately it's you have to continue to invest in the relationship. And you have to continue to make deposits. And it's tricky, it's difficult, especially with a teenager that moves into a phase of his life or her life where their peer set becomes more important, or oftentimes more important than the relationship with the parents. But I really do believe in the idea that if there's a depth of investment in the relationship, right, between the parent and child, that the probability of meaningful influence is raised. Okay. And if the parent invests and continues to invest in the relationship in supporting the child without it being necessary, the word I'm looking for is like punitive, right? If you continue to invest in the relationship in a loving and supportive way, and that's tricky because that's an abstract thing, right? Now we're talking about like these abstract ideas. parents oftentimes they want to control and they'll want to manage children,
Mhm.
right? And I think that how we do relationships, especially between parent and child, is going to be crucial to whether or not the parent has influence at the time, right? And so what that becomes, and that's a big part of the workbook, right?
Mhm.
Is how do we do relationships? How do we begin to redefine who we are when we show up into relationship with that other person?
Mhm.
You were saying something earlier, like when we want something from someone else, they'll feel that,
Mhm.
right? When you show up in the right way with the person and you're there with that person and you're present,
Mhm.
they'll feel that connection.
Yep.
And if you can do that enough, often enough, and establish the tie between you, you'll have the influence. It doesn't mean that they're going to listen to you all the time.
Right.
But if I'm telling you, Colin, you know what, Colin, you need to do what I say because I'm the authority here and I'm your parent. That's not building the relate. And even if I'm telling you, Colin, I love you, you got to do what I say.
Right.
That's not going to work, right? So I just think, as hard as it is to say, and as abstract as that may seem, I think that everyone at any given time is offered the opportunity to alter how they walk into the relationship. And so the parents, when they're met with the situation of the difficulties with the child, I think
Mhm.
the first thing you do is you check yourself and say, look, who am I right now entering into this? And how do I get into space with this person?
Mhm.
Because my thing was when I was young was I didn't want anyone to see my wound.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to see my wound. I didn't want to acknowledge it. What I wanted to do is I wanted to lash out at the world with it. So I needed someone that I trusted enough for me to expose that
Mhm.
in all of its shame and all of its hurt and all of its pain. And I just wasn't willing to do it. And it
Mhm.
wasn't that anyone else didn't try, and there's no bad on them. It was just that something happened in the relationships. My mom loved me and she tried everything she could. But at that point, I was disconnected, you know?
Mhm.
So that's my best answer to that. And I wish I could give a formula, but that's one of the things about this, right? There isn't a formula. It's
Sure.
it's it's staying in it and then finding the way. And sometimes you're grappling through the dark.
Yeah. And is there anything that you think schools or society can do to
Mm,
help support parents who are dealing with this sort of thing? Just feels like parents are left alone to deal with this kind of
yeah.
thing. And if you don't handle it, then I'm sure like you said, your mom loves you and she tried her best, but at a certain point, um, what more can be done? I mean, is there support groups? Is there um, is that something that you do right now in terms of mentoring younger boys and men,
Yeah,
helping them
absolutely.
deal with this type of rage and anger that where no one else seems to understand their plight?
Absolutely. That's something that I'm engaged with, and that's a tricky process, right? Because again, you're coming into a situation and developing a relationship with a person, and then working towards being consistent in their lives
Mm,
and being consistent in how you show up. And sometimes, Colin, like if the result is not what I hope it is, especially dealing with a young person who may have trust issues anyways and authority issues, right? Um, I can't personalize if I'm perceiving them to reject me initially, right? I have to realize that we're walking into a process together.
mhm,
And I'm in the long game here with them, right? This is not like, hey man, I'm going to give you a prescription on how to deal with this personality and you're going to do XYZ and they're just going to respond. It's not a parlor trick like that.
mhm,
This is staying in relationship to that individual, recognizing the value of that individual,
mhm,
and it's connecting to them, right? And
mhm,
so I'm absolutely involved with it. Now, what do I think schools and other resources in the community can do? Uh, I think that there's a lot of effort being put towards this currently.
mhm,
Um, one of the challenges I think with parents specifically in terms of like maybe there would be coaching for parents to sort of get used to this skill set of re-engaging with their children in new ways. Many parents are strapped with the harsh reality that they're busy going to work and
Hmm.
spending their energy at work to make ends meet, and they don't necessarily have the time or energy to take another class so that they can come home and work with, like, the system really isn't set up to
Hmm.
nurture what we're talking about, right? At
Yeah.
least not right now that I see. So I wish ideally what would happen is that services would be offered more readily to people, and they'd be given time to really like soak this stuff up, right? And
Hmm.
it's a difficult call. That being said, that's why I think it's an all hands on deck thing, and
Hmm.
that as many people as we can get involved with this work, we need to get them involved.
Yeah. And when you were arrested and in jail and
Mm.
going through the whole trial process, at that point, you said you were 18 years old.
I was 18 and 19 going through the trial.
Okay.
Yeah,
And so it was a 2 year process before you were then
about 16 months. Yeah.
incarcerated and sentenced to jail. And at that point, um, what was going through your mind in terms of, okay, I'm about to go to jail? I mean, after watch, like we watch TV and movies and we see what we think jail is like.
Mm.
What was going through your head when you were told you're going to be spending the rest of your life in jail? What I mean, what I don't know what.
So there was, yeah, no, it was really, really surreal because I'm a young man at the time. I'm really, really confused about myself and the world, and they're telling me I have life without parole plus 8 years, and uh, I was just thinking. On one side, I was thinking my life is over, it's hopeless, and on the other side, I'm thinking, well, maybe I'll get an appeal. Like there's that part of me that's hoping that something will change, but then there's the other part of me that just completely like it's such a big concept that I really think that a part of me just checked out. Like it just became surreal, right? And the feeling, Colin, is you're on this conveyor belt and you can't stop it. And you just know that you're heading towards something and you're in this process now that like you're heading towards something bad. And that's what it felt like. Like doom is coming. Really. That's that how I would explain that.
And when you were sentenced to jail, which prison were you sent to?
Initially I went to reception in Delano, Kern Valley or North Kern Valley, and then I went to the first real prison yard that I went to was a place called Salinas Valley State Prison.
Okay. And how many prisoners were in that prison at that time? Do you remember?
Whoosh. Wow, thousands. The yard I was on, there was probably like 500 to 800 people just on that yard, and there was, I think, at least 6 yards in that institution. So yeah, there's thousands. And just to give you some scope, like at one point, I think California had over 136,000 like prisoners. So it's a pretty it was a booming business at the time.
And like when you first went in there, just to kind of give us an idea of what that's like when you go in there, are there people, you said you didn't want to be bullied when you went in there. Did you meet people right away? Did people like befriend you or say, hey man, you better watch your back, you better like learn, or obviously I'm sure there's gangs in the prisons. Can you just kind of share what that whole experience is like? Because what we know is from what we see on TV, and I'm just curious if it's similar to that experience.
Um, so at the time, yeah, I was pretty much just set up with a peer group, right? And that's so at the time, prison was racially divided, and I was a white inmate, so I was celled up with a white inmate, and it was assumed that I would run with the white inmates and adopt their ideas and norms and beliefs, and I did all of those things
And
for
so
the most part.
the prison actually segregates prisoners by
Yes,
race.
yeah, yeah.
Really?
Because when you first get to prison, they'll ask you like, who do you run with? And so if you if I'm at the time I'm non-affiliated, right? with any specific gang. Uh, they just put me with a white inmate, and then that in itself becomes a whole experience unto itself. Like the racial divide that was happening in prisons at that time, and
Yeah.
the way that people were racially segregated because each group came with its own set of expectations, uh,
Mhm.
relationships to themselves with themselves and the other groups, and politics. So yeah, yeah,
And I'm sure gangs are rampant in the prison system. And
they are.
are the guards a part of this? Do they get kickbacks? I mean, is this? I'm just really curious about.
Well, there's definitely has been levels of corruption.
Yeah.
I think that's always been a challenge with prisons. And that being said, I definitely don't want to misconstrue. I don't think that every CO that works prison is a criminal.
Mhm.
Um, Nor do I think that every person that goes to prison, uh, is necessarily a bad person. I think that they have a redeemable value. Absolutely, they may have done things that were bad,
Mhm.
uh, and I think that a lot of times people are just in an overwhelming circumstance and they do what they can to get by, and a lot of times people you know Colin, a lot of guys I met were doing bad things in there,
Mhm.
and they really thought that they were doing the right thing, like because they were just messed up inside, and their ideas about themselves in the world were warped.
Mhm.
Their ideas of what was like their values were warped, and it wasn't necessarily that they meant to be wrong.
Mhm.
They just had never course corrected, right? And I don't mean that to absolve them of their responsibility, but I
Yeah.
mean that a person can get so confused that they tell themselves they're doing right when to other outside observers what they're doing is clearly wrong. And
Mhm.
there's a lot of that goes in there because people feed off of each other,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And Nicole Weinberg put a comment in here saying mass incarceration is definitely a business. Did you feel that there was a sense of um, the prison system is designed to just get guys in there and make money off of the prisoners and this whole incarceration business? Because the America has the highest incarceration rate
Yeah.
of any of the industrialized nations in the world. Um, I'm just curious of what your thoughts were and about just the prison system in general. And is there a way that you see to maybe improve upon it or change the system?
Yeah. So I would say the first like 15 to 19 years, I think that prison was essentially warehousing people and it was a booming business. And then now I think there's been a lot of really strong strides to release prisoners and to do so in a responsible manner after they've received the appropriate, amount of therapy and self-help and also education and vocational training. I think there's been a lot of effort that's been put forward or forth towards helping prisoners release responsibly into the community so they can be contributing members of the community.
Mhm.
And so there's a lot of work that still needs to be done there. But there's been, in the last 10 years, I'd say some amazing things have happened. Um, guys are going into prison now, or guys are coming out of prison now with bachelor's degrees. Guys are coming out of prison now with vocational certifications and training and all kinds of different trades so that they're able to come out with real skills to, live in society successfully.
Yeah.
The organization I work for, the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, we're one of the organizations that goes in and does groups and courses for men and youngsters inside to help them get ready to come home. And then when they come home, we help provide them with reentry services.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of other organizations that are cropping up to help in this work as well. And I think that, like we were speaking about earlier with the parents and the youth, this
Yeah.
is an all hands on deck situation. And it really does take a full community to come together to
Mhm.
help with this. And some of the best human beings that I know today are guys that were doing life sentences and are now home and giving back to the community. Like amazing, amazing stories that are really, really touching. And a lot of that is because people outside began changing their ideas or became willing to view us in a new way and offer us opportunities, including education in college. And there's a organization called the Five Ventures that comes in and helps us learn business entrepreneurship, right?
Amazing.
Yeah, just amazing things happening. Dog training, right? Bringing dogs in and letting us learn to become certified trainers. Just awesome stuff that 20 years ago we never would have imagined, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So a lot of strides, and I just think that that work needs to continue. Yeah.
And from your experience towards the latter part of you being in prison, it sounds like you really had, this revelation of, awareness of this new self-identity of wanting to make a better life for yourself. And I commend you for making that difficult decision to decide that you just couldn't continue on that path anymore. And it was really interesting to hear how you said when you decided to do that, your friend decided to go along with you. And it's kind of crazy how when you're with a partner or a friend or in a relationship and you feel like if you were to say something, it might fractionalize or break up the relationship. But when in reality, what happened with you by being honest with yourself, it really helped course correct the relationship and it puts you on this different path now towards where you have been benefiting other people. And you put together a workbook, right?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about what this workbook is about? I believe it's called Move Your Mountain Program, available on
Move Your Mountain Program is essentially, it's the workshop experience. There's no preamble to the book. It's based on a series of workshops that I began creating while I was in prison. And these workshops were inspired by things that I studied. They were inspired by conversations that I'd had with mentors and things that I had learned with the guys that I was involved with. And these things were things that I used to teach in there and share with the guys in there. And now I've brought it out here and it's condensed into one workbook, the Move Your Mountain Program. The ideas contained in herein are ideas that were essential in me changing my life to go from a life without sentence to now being out here living a life full of meaning and purpose. And it's been a beautiful journey. I'd love to do in-person workshops, but for people that can't come, you get a glimpse of what the experience is like through the workbook. So that's what the workbook is.
Amazing.
And I just wanted to say, Colin, when I finally did start changing my life, one of the best things that happened when I was reading the books and I began really applying the stuff and I didn't know what I was doing. What I did was I just did what was in the books. And I found the people that were doing the things that I wanted to do. I came and I said, look, I'm gonna bring value to you. Give me something to do. And then I'd execute on the task. And I just kept doing that. And all I was doing was finding a way to serve. What became the antidote, what became the medicine was service, right? It became getting in there, having conversations with people, sharing myself with them, allowing them to share themselves with me, right? Learning a whole new set of skills, allowing myself to walk through the process of feeling like cumbersome as I developed the skill set, and then continuing growing, right?
Yeah.
Staying in humility, staying open to the fact that I can continually learn. So in a nutshell.
Do you feel like that was instrumental in your release from prison?
Absolutely. Because of that, because I was willing to get around these people and because I had the mindset of being of service and giving and openness, it allowed people and opportunities to come into my life that wouldn't have manifested otherwise. And what happened was at one point I went from the guy that had basically to beg for an opportunity to being the guy who had the pick of all the opportunities and was helping funnel opportunities to other people, right? And that opened up the door for me to get commuted by the governor, and it changed my life without sentence to 30 to life, which allowed me to go to before the parole board and eventually be found suitable. What I realized is that a miracle can happen in your life, but you have to help it along.
Yeah.
Right? Like position yourself in faith, so that when the time comes, when the opportunity comes, you can receive it and act upon it. And another critical lesson that I learned is that, Colin, not all blessings come with a gift wrap and a bow.
Mm-hmm.
Some blessings come wrapped in thorns, but you have to be able to recognize that the blessing is there,
Yeah.
and how to work with that thing that's going to have immense value for yourself and for other people.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. That's incredible, Jason. I mean, you're incredibly inspiring with what you've been through and just where you have positioned your life now at this point. So now you've been out of prison now for 9 months. What's next for you? What do you see now that you've got this second chance at life? What can we see from you, and what great things are you planning?
Well, I'm currently working in the reentry space as a life coach, what they call a credible messenger. And also I'm looking to expand my own personal coaching. I'm looking to connect with people. I'm looking to work with them through the process of change and growth and contribution and value. And I'm also looking to just spend time with my family, give back to them, give back to the community, and knock down all the items that have been on my bucket list for so long,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
So,
How's
yeah.
your relationship with your mom now?
Sadly, my mom passed away just a few months ago.
Sorry to hear.
I was able to, yeah, it was tough, very, extremely tough. Uh, she was able to see me come home. She was able to see me become the man that she knew I could be. And I was able to be by her side. And, had I never taken the steps to change my life and stayed in the cycle, had I stayed in the fear that kept me trapped in that cycle, I wouldn't have been able to be there for my mom in
Yeah.
her last moments. And one of the last things she told me, or she said to me about 2 weeks before she passed, was how proud of me she was. And so I
Mm.
just know that, I wish I would have had more time with her. But I'm so glad that she was able to experience um, life with me out here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great, and just commendable, just what you're doing now. And for anyone who's interested in maybe getting some of your guidance or counsel or help with maybe their own kids or what they're dealing with personally, how can people get in touch with you?
I'd say the best way is to go to my Instagram at one Jason Holland, or look up and log in at Jason Holland Coaching, and see if they can establish contact through the website.
Okay. So, guys, be sure to follow Jason at one Jason Holland on IG, on Instagram. And yeah, you're doing great work, Jason. And once I get out to Los Angeles, would love to connect with you in
Oh, I
person.
love it. Yeah, that'd be great. And thank you so much, Colin. Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
appreciate it. But you're not done yet, my friends.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right.
The 6 questions that I always ask my
Mhm.
guests at the end of the show here. And these are movie related. So are you ready for these?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay. So the first question is, what was your favorite movie, or what is your favorite movie of all time?
That is a tough one. And I'm going to go with Forrest Gump.
All right.
That is the movie that I've watched like over and over, and I never get tired of it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you. What about that movie did you like?
I love all the transitions in his life and how he just kept finding a way to be like in the center of everything. It was just
Yeah.
amazing, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you were in prison, did you have like movie nights at in the communal areas, or were you able to watch movies whenever you wanted to?
Yeah, yeah. We're allowed to have TVs in the cell, and there's a movie channel that they play movies on like weekly. So yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm.
Awesome. What was your favorite movie when you were growing up as a kid?
Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Oh, amazing. Such a
Yeah,
great movie.
I
Yeah.
love that movie.
Yeah. What would you say is your favorite thing about that movie?
Ferris, it just was such a fun movie, and he had this spirit, this spirit of like just mischief, And that really spoke to me as a kid. Like the whole thing where he had the mannequin underneath the bed and it was set up to where, they opened the door and it was
And
making
it would
sounds.
move
Like
and
as
yeah,
a kid, that just fascinated me,
yeah.
So
I just always loved too, just how he always seemed to have everything figured out.
yeah, he had it all figured
No matter
out.
how bad things were, he was always just like, "It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be
Yeah.
just fine." And as
Yeah.
Cameron is there freaking out because his dad's Ferrari just like flew off the back of the glass garage.
Yeah. Very strange.
What is your favorite romantic comedy
My favorite romantic comedy.
or romance?
Gosh. I'm gonna say, well, romance. I'm gonna go with The Notebook. It's a
All right,
classic.
dude.
And
I love that movie.
everything you need to know about relationships is in that book.
Yes,
Like
yes.
anything that goes wrong with the girl, just go build her a house. That's it right there.
There you
That's
go.
it.
Yeah. Are you currently with anyone? Do you have
Yes.
personal
Yes.
relationships? Yeah.
Yes.
Is
I have a
it?
fiance.
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Is this new or was this something that?
No, it's been ongoing, and we've known each other. We've loved each other since we were 12. We were best friends through my entire journey, and now we're together, and we've been together for some years now.
Holy cow! Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks.
How often was she able to come see you in prison?
Oh, she came frequently. Yeah, and she came frequently over the years. So, and she's been just my most constant companion, like best friend. We exchanged letters. She's got letters in boxes and suitcases up there for me over the years. So that in itself is just an entire story. It's a
Similar,
beautiful thing.
similar to
Yeah.
the book.
Yeah. A
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah.
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 What would you say is something about her that inspires you?
She is love personified. She is love. Yeah. It's she's just a beautiful, beautiful human being. Yeah.
Yeah. And pure love can see real love in other people. And
Yeah.
that's
And she was with me through my darkest times, and never gave up on me even when I had given up on myself. And she's just beautiful. And also she can hold the fort down. She's tough woman.
awesome.
I'm lucky.
What is your favorite comedy?
Show or movie?
I'll let you say whatever if you want to say show.
I'm gonna say Seinfeld.
Seinfeld. All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. That
Awesome.
shows.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'm sure you've watched every episode. Yeah.
Probably every episode, probably more than once. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, can't argue with that.
No.
Who's your favorite actor or male character in a movie?
The person that comes to mind is Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Mm.
That guy, his range and his ability to like hit a character was really something special.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about self-identity and character work. This is a lot of what we talk about as actors. So when you were talking about just having this self-identity crisis and talking about the scripts, I mean, that really resonates because that's essentially what we do as actors is we take on a script and we completely commit ourselves to that script. And it made me realize and question what script was I living in when I was growing up. And again, a lot of the times we tell ourselves these inauthentic scripts about who we are, just based on where we grew up and our influences and that sort of thing. So, yeah,
absolutely.
And how about favorite actress or female character?
I'm gonna go with Kathy Bates in Misery.
Oh, Jesus!
She scared the pants, man. That was a role. That was quite a role.
Yeah, she's one of these actresses that just makes it look so natural, right? Like you just like this. She looks way too comfortable and natural with just bashing his ankles with a sledgehammer.
Yeah, I believed her. I believed her.
Oh God, yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah, nightmares about her for sure. Well, Jason, thanks so much for being here and your contribution and just being an inspiration for resiliency. And again, everyone, you can check out Jason's Move Your Mountain program on Amazon, which is a workbook. And who would you say the workbook is geared towards?
I think the workbook's geared towards anyone who is looking to have a shift in their lives, in any area of their life, whether that's physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, right? And if you're looking to have a shift in the quality of your relationships and the quality of your life, this book is for you. This book is going to challenge you to really look at what's going on inside of you and what's preventing you from getting to the place that you say you want to be, right? And it's put in a workshop format. So, yeah.
Awesome. Excited to check that out. And lastly, I asked my guests before we check out here, Jason, what is the thing that inspires you most in life?
I think what inspires me most is when I see a person really open up and face something that's challenging in their lives and take a step towards what could be, right, for themselves, for the best. And when I see a person fully open up to their humanity and like the courage that's there, the well of power that's there, and get away from all the stuff they're using to hide in, to me, that's inspiring, because what that tells me is that there's a well of potential in each one of us, and we can tap into it at any given time. We just gotta have the courage. And that really, really touches me. Yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
Well, Jason, you are that. So thank you for reminding us of that and the potential within each and every one of us. And I wish you my best, my friend. Looking forward to meeting you in person when I'm out in LA.
Please. Yeah, reach out. Thank you, Colin. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Have a great evening. Chat with you later.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Another amazing episode. Wow. Yeah, it's definitely an episode we're going to want to rewatch. He just dropped a lot of really empowering nuggets of gold. Just in terms of what I really liked about what he talked about in terms of relationships and making deposits in these relationships, so that when it comes time to really have some of these difficult conversations that need to be had a lot of the times in life, that you've got the investment of time and love and contribution, where people feel that you actually have an invested interest in them, which, as Jason mentioned, is the thing that really probably would have made, a bigger difference in his life. And I really liked what he said about positioning yourself in faith, and that, no one's going to come and rescue you. And it was really inspiring to hear him say just that when he made that difficult decision where he was going down that path and could have stayed on that same path in prison, but he finally came to a point in his life where he had to make that difficult decision to be honest with himself about who he really was and the self-identity and the inauthentic script that he was playing in his life. I'm telling you, you can see it. And Jason even just, reiterated it tonight, that when we make these difficult decisions, as difficult as they are, there's a whole wealth of miracles and transformation and amazing things on the other side of that difficult decision. So no matter where you're at, what you're dealing with, here's just another little piece of advice and evidence that when you finally make that decision and are honest with yourself, no matter how scary and how difficult it may be, there is a whole treasure on the other side of that decision making. And loved how he said that that service is medicine. And as I mentioned earlier, and I just keep talking about, when you show up with this attitude of service and gratitude, and continue to show up in life and find out what people need, and just be that person who provides a space for listening and for a space for someone to be seen and heard authentically, it is the best gift you can give to someone. And I think that really says a lot about when Jason was talking about making these deposits. That's a great way for you to start making these deposits, and just ask the question that he asked tonight: what is your potential? And knowing what your potential is, and just knowing that we all have potential within each and every one of us. And and that it just sometimes needs to be seen. And sometimes even if someone else out there in the outside world doesn't see it, it's important that you see it within yourself, and that you position yourself in a community and get connected to a network or a coach or a mentor, as he was talking about, who is doing the things that you want to be doing, and who you find says the things that resonate with you on that deeper level in your heart, in your soul. And that's a big reason why I do what I do. And that's a big reason why I continue to do my coaching and put out my Inspire program and my retreats. It's a big reason why I have my Patreon program every month, where 3 times a month we meet for Hour of Empower, the first Tuesday of the month. Second Tuesday of the month is our meditation and visualization session, where it allows you the opportunity to just get reconnected to yourself and allow that space to be created for your soul to speak to you and tell you what is really going on and what it really needs. And then the third Tuesday of the month is all about the art of relationships. And we watch a movie every month, and we talk about the movie and the relationship, what we can learn from it, and how it can benefit us in our own personal lives. So that being said, ladies and gents, thank you so much for being here. Please subscribe and hit that notification button, so that anytime I have anything going on that you might be interested in checking out, you are notified of it and that you don't miss it. And just thank you again for your continued support. Thank you again for all the servicemen and women out there on this Memorial Day. And I will see you guys all very soon. And next week. All right. Take care. And we'll see you soon.